So please, everyone, give him an extremely warm welcome tonight.
Well, thanks, Claire, and comrades, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak tonight and to bring my personal support to this great celebration and discussion of socialist ideas. And I'm sure I won't be the first or the last to comment on the fact that I think it's fair to say we're living in some strange and weird times. While it's important always to recognise the profound dangers reflected in, obviously, Donald J. Trump's election, reminds you of Leonard Cohen's apocalyptic song, The Future, the racism that we see in British society should be remembered, stoked up before the Brexit vote, still stoked up afterwards by right-wing politicians and the gutter press, the growth of the far right we see across Europe, with some very worrying elections coming up in a number of countries in the next few months. But while it's important to recognise those profound dangers, I think it's equally important to recognise the possibilities that exist in the world today, the possibilities of building support for socialist ideas that we're beginning to see spreading across the world. And I think it's equally important to recognise that when 90 companies from the dawn of the industrial age, from 1751 to 2004, are responsible for 2/3 of greenhouse emissions, with 50% pumped out in the last 25 years alone, I think we've got to recognise capitalism is utterly incapable of taking the decisive action on climate change on the scale or the time that is needed. And it means the struggle for socialism, and it's reflected in the work of our comrades in the United States, is about the fight for socialism is now a fight about saving the very planet on which we live. Now, the Tory government, Theresa May, claims that she's governing for the many and not the privileged few. But I think it's fair to say from a PCS perspective, or perspective of every public sector worker, there is no respite. The spending plans based on Osborne's plans of 2015 are determining what they're doing. And unless we stop them, as with austerity, Brexit will become the pretext yet again for making the working class pay the price. After 20% cut in the civil service in the last 6 years, every department is confronted with a massive programme of job cuts and office closures. We're now confronted with the imposition of imposed changes to the compensation scheme, which represents a cut between 25 to 30% in redundancy payments to our members, all designed, as we know, to help the employer shed jobs quicker and cheaper. After the farce of negotiations, I'm pleased to say that the unions representing 30,000 of civil service workers, ourselves and the PLA representing in excess of 200,000 civil service workers, have stood out against this particular attack. Now, I'm reminded of the quote, when you see what's come the way of PCS, reminded of the quote of Noam Chomsky, who said that for ruling elites, successful defiance must always be punished. And PCS's track record, with Mark and the NEC's leadership in defending members, in promoting activism, in galvanising opposition across the wider trade union movement, we've seen an attack on union facility time, an attack on workplace organisation, but it's also an attack on the leadership of the union, best expressed in a document written to the board of Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, a department that should be collecting and dealing with the tax dodgers, spending time to discuss a document that I quote, on how to deal with the intractable problem of PCS, and yes, I quote, to achieve the degradation of PCS's organising capability by permanently reducing the influence of its union leaders. In Britain, the PCS is the only union that's had to deal with the removal of check-off, a method of collecting our subs. But we got on with that, and we've defied the Tory attempts to break this union, financially and organisationally, by recruiting over a 6-month period, effectively over 152,000 out of the 160,000 members we needed to recruit. That's our answer to those that have attempted to break this union. And we can be relied upon to continue to fight back, to keep on keeping on. We're going to build up the support in our groups. 2 examples, the marvellous demonstration, for example, that we saw last Saturday with PCS and Unison and other unions and campaigners, artists, defending and fighting against the cuts in the museums and galleries. And of course, it has to be remembered, that's built on the industrial battles of our members in the National Gallery and the successful battles that we've had in the museums of Scotland and Wales. Noteworthy with a contingent from the French CGT, bringing their own solidarity and a big contingent. And again, I make the point that after Brexit, as the European Union disintegrates effectively, it's going to be even more important that we build our own independent, working class international links. I just want to talk about just a couple more examples. And again, just, satire is dead in some ways, as somebody once said. In the Equality and Human Rights Commission, we're currently involved in a dispute against massive job cuts and office closures. And we found, as a result of the pressure on the employer, that 73% of BME staff employed by the Equality and Human Rights Commission have been selected and targeted for redundancy. And the only thing we can say is that we will continue to fight in every way possible. We will continue to build up the support and action in individual groups, and most importantly, to continue the pressure for the British trade union movement to recognise and step up to its responsibilities and organise the coordinated strike action that is going to be needed if we're serious about halting the government attacks upon the working class. Now, in drawing to a close, I also just want to make a brief observation and pay tribute to the Prison Officers Association. Now, we're told in many quarters that the panoply of anti-union laws, the new threshold, make it virtually impossible to fight back. Well, the POA showed, not that you saw much in the newspapers, they showed that they were prepared to take action, illegal, coordinated strike action against the inhuman conditions that prevail in the British prisons of today. And they forced this government back to the table to negotiate properly. That is a reflection of union power, but it also speaks volumes about how the trade union movement should respond to the anti-union law. Now, we know the attacks that they've perpetrated. It goes back from Ridley, the early 80s. Bill Mullins' book in British Leyland gives a flavour of that. How to isolate particular disputes in the early 80s to prepare the ground for the big battle with the miners. And of course, I just need to make a quick comment that that's of course why the Tories and the state are terrified of an inquiry, not just because it means getting justice for those that were victimised, but at the same time it will expose the massive state conspiracy that was applied to defeat the most powerful union in the land. Our only answer being asked to sum up is, and there's no shortcut to this, but our only answer is to develop an industrial and political programme, a militant industrial and political programme that is worth fighting for. That is how we galvanise opposition to this government and the capitalist class. And my very final line is that workers created trade unions, historically it should be remembered, out of nothing but necessity. 150 to 180 million, for the same reason, 150 to 180 million workers, public sector workers in India took the biggest general strike in human history took place in September. And I'm sure that unions will continue to play a part in the discussions this weekend, in the resurgence of socialist ideas in the UK and across the world, and a big part in the impending struggle of the international working class to eventually win what is rightfully ours. Thanks for listening, comrades.